you all visited from?
Glasgow.
Okay, is this your first time being able to see as an adult?
Yes.
I'm so happy to have you. I am working on our loom this morning. Now, this loom's not quite as old as that edge isn't as nice as I like to do. Now, the loom is not quite as old as the fort, but she's still celebrating her 2-century birthday, so you know, she's having a good life. This is a floor loom, so they are incredibly big and bulky and tend to stay where you put them because they take a lot of talent and skill and time to get up and down. Now, this is a pretty new loom in the history of looms. We've been weaving on looms hundreds of thousands of years, if not longer. Most of them were more portable when humans had a more itinerant lifestyle, so we see things like Norse hanging looms, which were this, but really just the strings turned vertically, and as opposed to having all of this big wooden framework to hold it together, they just weighted it with heavy stones, rocks, iron bits, whatever was on hand. It really works the same way, but you can operate it while sitting on a stool, and you can put it pretty much anywhere. You can move it inside your doorway in the cooler months, or you can bring it out in the summer months when you have more light and a better temperature to work with. So it is a lot more transportable, but this helps to take a lot of the tedious work out of it. So when you weave, you always go under, over, under, over. And on something like a box loom, or an ingle loom, or a hanging loom, you are going to have to weave that under over manually, which means paying a lot of attention to patterns and where you are in that weaving. Here, the two petals down at my feet will actually change the warp threads, and so they'll move them within each other, and they will allow the under over to be done naturally. It just makes it a little less tedious on me. And then you have this arm, the shuttle, that comes down and it presses the pattern together. What you're really doing is just making a grid out of that fabric, and you can see how those warp threads trade places. And so now, when I pass this, it will naturally weave that under over because those two threads are being forcefully separated by the loom mechanisms. And then all I have to do is sit here and kind of pull it through. And now the trickiest part is making sure these ends are all roughly the same length, or it all kind of comes out looking crooked at the end if you don't pay attention to your ends. You always want to do a little arch shape right here, because when you bring this arm down, it's going to compress everything. And so if you pull it too tight, that fabric will start to bunch in on itself when the shuttle hits it. Now, this is a fairly advanced loom mechanism. You can make them at home very easily. A piece of cardboard and some string will do you just fine. But this would have been an invaluable tool in the lives of the pioneers here. A huge majority of them are coming and making their own cloth. And this is a pretty easy adventure here with these rugs, because the cloth is so wide that it is less of a problem. But if you can imagine spinning something like wool thread and then having to weave it into cloth, it's an incredibly laborious process. It can take almost 200 to 300 passes of a loom shuttle to get about an inch of fabric. Wow. So it is an incredibly long, arduous process. It also means the weight for new clothing is very substantial. You are probably wearing the same 2 or 3 sets of clothes year round, and that's why layers are so important. So right now I have on a chemise, which is just this white, it's called a shift chemise. It depends on geographically where you are and what period of history you are in. But it exists into the 1950s as a slip, and it's this garment that you wear under your nicer clothes, and it's really just meant to absorb all of your body oil and sweat and all of those things that you don't want your clothes to smell like, because fire smoke is just a ubiquitous scent of the period. Everybody smells like it. You're a lot less worried about keeping that out of your clothes than you are the oil that's going to degrade the textile over a period of time. So these chemises are great. They're cheap to make because they're usually just white. It is a one-size-ish fits all situation where it's much more of a nightgown. It's less tailored to your body. And the more you wash them and put them in the sun, the whiter they're going to get. So there's a lot less worry about the integrity of your dye colors as well, because dyeing is also an incredibly long, arduous process here. And depending on the color, very, very expensive. So you're trying to keep all of those colors situated the right way, or they'll start to fade and run, and all of that hard work will have been for nothing. So it's very practical to be able to have a garment making industry here. Now, it is, again, also very time consuming, and This is really an all hands on deck kind of situation. Pretty much everybody from the age 6 of onward learns how to be part of the textile industry here. Now, this is a very remote region at that time. That will start to phase out as it becomes more and more urban, simply because you have shops and stores and merchants who are coming in with their trade goods, which make it easier for you to be able to just purchase bolts of cloth or pre-made clothing, which will start to come into effect in Harrodsburg's golden years. But this really is all there is to it. This is definitely a fall-winter task. So we are very lucky here because we don't grow our own food, that we have the luxury of doing some of these cottage crafts year-round, as opposed to just when it is too cold to be outside. But this would have also been an excellent chance for women to socialize. You would have come here with your spinning wheel, there would have been a loom set up, and you really would have taken this opportunity to socialize with the rest of your community, especially since men are traditionally out long hunting in the winter anyways. So your cabin is just you and all of your kids, which can get a little hectic sometimes. So this can also be a community activity that helps to create a system of support and friendship, even out here in the middle of the wilderness.
I have a question. That stand of bamboo that we passed, I know they didn't call it bamboo.
So it's river cane.
River cane.
So that's
Thank
Kentucky
you.
river cane.
Cane fields.
She grows like crazy. Incredibly useful both for fishing rods and as a form of cover. Not great for eating, both for livestock or for human purposes, but incredibly useful for the fishing industry, especially if you live down towards the Dicks or the Kentucky, which are completely abundant in edible fish. And we grow it here because it was so ubiquitous when the pioneers came here. And it still grows like crazy for us. We've probably had to cut that back twice this summer because it just takes off and it will not stop. And it likes these nice hot summers that we've been having. So